Good day to you. This is Galactic. We present astronomy here. I've been presenting astronomy for 3 years on YouTube. Astronomy leads us into geometry, and in this presentation series, after 3 years of introduction, this is the presentation of the first non-Euclidean geometry in the history of science. It's spherical geometry. The so-called non-Euclidean geometries I covered in the past couple of presentations, but let's summarize that here. The only geometry that's ever been used in science is linear geometry, and there is only one other geometry which I discovered in 2022. This fully explains the universe progressively using the standard methods of science. Linear geometry has hit a brick wall. To continue to express what is very rarely expressed in any educational system currently, there has only and ever been one geometry, but the word geometry is now corrupt. So actually, the situation is this. Science uses trigonometry, and that's the only correct word. Geometry is not the correct word, for reasons which I've described carefully, but let's make sure we understand. You must understand this at first. This is synthetic, which means that the difficulty comes at the beginning. In standard science, which results in calculus, the difficulties come at the end. Using ridiculous mathematical systems, tools that have been developed to try to compensate for the inherent limitations of trigonometry. Trigonometry was invented and discovered by Euclid. That's his only name, Euclid. He lived in the Bronze Age. He lived well before the time of Christ. So it's remarkable that his system has persisted for over 2 millennia. It is no longer adequate because science made some discoveries in the 20th century that changes the nature of physics and changes the nature of reality. It now requires, that is, the universe requires of us, a complete overhaul of our ancient mathematical system, which is inadequate to deal with reality. That is well known now, but of course there's a good deal of pretending going on because of the nature of the world, which runs on money. Governments control money, and that's all we're going to say there. I've given several presentations on the state of the world, which is hopeless now. So what we're doing is going on with a blueprint which cannot be abrogated. It doesn't make any difference what the world does. It doesn't make any difference what the psychotic physicists say. And it doesn't make any difference how many thousands and thousands of 1,000-page thick physics textbooks are written, all relying on calculus, the Riemann sphere, complex numbers, sine, cosine, all of which are outdated. They don't work. What has confused the mind of man, including all listeners, who are trying to understand what science claims to understand. The nature of the universe is not susceptible to linear logic. It's just that simple. It was in the 20th century that science came face to face with the sphere. This is psychotically overlooked. It's not taught anywhere. That we have a science system that's 2 millennia out of date. We're using lines. We're using lines when the entire universe is composed spherically. That's been proved. It's been proved so thoroughly that all the presentations on YouTube dealing with cutting-edge science deal with spherical phenomena. Light, gravity, the atom, the proton, the electron, the photon, stars, galaxies, the universe itself. Spherical clusters of galaxies. Everything is spherical. Everything is spherical. So why do we use lines? It's because we were blueprinted to use lines. We had to have Euclid. We had to go through 2,000 years of struggle. Why? To invent the number system. Why? Because numbers are computable. The computable numbers. You would not be able to look at this video right now on YouTube if it weren't for the fact that machine logic works. Machine logic is 0, 1. That's linear. How do you know it's linear? Because it has a 0 in it. The universe does not have a zero in it. The first thing we want to look at is the foundation of Euclidean geometry. This is by a man named Wolf, but this has been written over and over again. So let's just go through this real quickly, in under 30 seconds. The definitions, the common notions, the postulates. Oh shit. Let's go to chapter 2, the fifth postulate. You know what that is, if you know anything at all. If you're educated, you've been brainwashed with the fifth postulate. That's supposed to be revolutionary. That non-Euclidean geometry is based on a re-axiomatization of Euclid's fifth postulate. Nothing of what I just said makes sense, but that's what we were taught. The fifth postulate has nothing to do with Euclid's axiomatic system, which deals with a point and the line, and that's it. So what's this fifth postulate? What's a fifth postulate? It's something he threw in as an afterthought because he was a primitive. He's not an advanced man. Euclid lived in the Bronze fucking Age, okay? So the fifth postulate has to do with parallelity. We'll see there's a whole list of names here, beginning with Ptolemy, Proclus, Nasiruddin, Wallace, Zachary, Lambert, Legendre. It goes on and on. Everybody's dealt with the fifth postulate, right up until the time of Bolyai, Lobachevsky, and Gauss. And so what we're taught is non-Euclidean geometry is the geometry that denies the fifth postulate, which is what? The two parallel lines stay parallel all the way to infinity. Back in about the 17th century, that was overturned with a new form of so-called geometry called projective geometry, which says that Euclid is full of shit. Now let's be sure of something here. It doesn't make any difference what the fifth postulate says. It's not important, no matter what these men have said about it. That has nothing to do with the axiomatic basis of Euclidean so-called geometry. All it is the geometry of the straight line. The idea of parallelity was beyond Euclid, and it's beyond all of these men in this list. You cannot understand what it means to be parallel, because infinity is imaginary. So if two lines are parallel to infinity, you don't know what that means. And there's two answers. But there's considered now to be three answers if you consider the term non-Euclidean to be valid. It is invalid. I discovered non-Euclidean geometry. There are only two geometries. The one we've been using and the one you and I were brainwashed with is trigonometry. Trigonometry is a form of geometry based on the straight line. There is only one other. Spherical geometry. If you try to look up spherical geometry, you will be frustrated. That is, if you study correctly, because nobody knows what spherical geometry is. There is no such thing. But there had to be a fake. There had to be a fake spherical geometry. That was invented by Riemann. And it's called the Riemann sphere. And if you want to study spherical geometry, you're stuck with that. And if you go with it, you'll lose your mind, just like everyone else has lost their mind, because Riemann was out of his mind. This is scientifically speaking. We're not talking about the man as a man. We're talking about the man as a scientist. Riemann's a dunce cap. So what actually is non-Euclidean geometry? It was discovered in 2022 in Chico, California, by a man that I'm somewhat become familiar with, myself. So this has a new number system. It has a new geometrical point of view on reality that solves all the paradoxes in physics. Nothing less than that. So let's get into it. Why do I have Christian Huygens listed here? This is from Wikipedia. We're going to go through this quickly so that you can fill in some of the information that your brilliant professors left out of your education. You've heard of Newton? Newton is shit. Newton didn't discover anything of any importance, really. He was important in certain senses, but Christian Huygens is a modernist. Bracketing the life of Newton, which includes the life of Leibniz, their lives overlapped. By the way, Christian Huygens was in communication with Leibniz constantly for a while, and he met Newton personally. Christian Huygens is the greatest scientist of the 17th century. Newton is second. In the 18th century, right after these three men died, came the greatest scientist of all time, Bošković. You ever heard of him? Of course you haven't heard of him. You might have heard of Huygens, and I'm pronouncing it in the Dutch fashion because I'm a scholar. Huygens. His name is Huygens. So he's the greatest scientist until Bošković. And the name of Huygens and the name of Bošković are immortal. Newton will be forgotten, and so will Leibniz. They didn't do anything of great importance. This is of transcendental importance. So who is Huygens? A man you were not taught about in school. Or if you were lied to. Okay? That's how it goes. He is a Dutch mathematician, physicist, engineer, astronomer, and inventor who is regarded as a key figure in the scientific revolution. In physics, Huygens made seminal contributions to optics and mechanics, while as an astronomer he studied the rings of Saturn and discovered its largest moon, Titan. All the great scientists are astronomers. All of them are. It's a one-to-one correspondence. That's why Einstein is left out. He was not an astronomer. He used his brain and he used his mathematical capacity, which was not very strong, but he got some last-minute lessons from some men such as Minkowski. So Einstein, we're never going to forget his name, but he's not that important. He missed the mark, and in fact, he misled us all, and you're going to find that out. So Huygens was an astronomer. That's right, an astronomer. Imagine that. As an engineer and inventor, he improved the design of telescopes and invented the pendulum clock, the most accurate timekeeper for almost 300 years. Did you know that? A talented mathematician and physicist, his works contain the first idealization of a physical problem by a set of mathematical parameters, and the first mathematical and mechanistic explanation of an unobservable physical phenomenon. That's what I do as well. This is the SpaceTime presentation as I promised. Here is the actual universe in geometrical parameterization visual form. You'll notice at the bottom are some notes, something called the radial line. That's the line that goes out from the center in all directions. Actually, that's the linear way of saying that it goes out in all directions because we think linearly. Let me tell you the right way to say that. It's one line that goes in one direction in spherical space. So those lines coming out from the center, this is a 2D projection, that is a sphere. Actually, two spheres. They're representative only and they're not drawn to scale at all. Both of these are invisible. And you now know something about invisibility from Huygens, who found out the method for probing invisible phenomena. It wasn't Newton. It was Huygens. And the man who actually got the entire geometry of physics was Bošković. He was an astronomer too. Both of those men believed in God, by the way. There are two spherical radial directions. One is centrifugal. That's one line. That's called a line of force. And it's one line. And it doesn't go in all directions. It goes in one spherical direction, which has a name, out. This is simpler than what you were taught in school. The inner surface of the universe. Have your physicists ever talked to you about the inner surface of the universe? You know where you'll find what they actually do know? The standard model of particle physics, which by its own definition is psychotic. 26 particles now, last count. Including or not including the Higgs fucking boson, which is a complete fabrication of mathematical... There are not 26 particles, there are two. That inner circle is the quantum. It's the center of the universe. It has a radius. There's no such thing as zero. That's a derivative infinity of a derivative number system called the linear number system, which the ape men, as they're taught to be, are using right out of the Stone Age. Technically the Bronze Age. You know what age we're in now? The space age. We're going to be talking about space, because space has to do with space-time. Imagine that. So that surface, which is labeled S-I-N, that's sin in religion. But it's actually surface sub in. So it's the inner surface of spherical space. This is the correct space, the one that Euclid couldn't understand, and the one that Einstein could not understand. But Huygens understood it, and so did Boschkovich. Newton did not. So Newton's out, and so is Einstein. We have to change everything that Einstein discovered. He does have some valid discoveries, or we would not be in outer space, but it's a linear solution. That's a dead end. You'll lose your mind. If you're serious about understanding the universe, and you believe in calculus, linear algebra, or any of the models or theories today, you're dead. You're doomed. Only if you listen to me will you have any chance of understanding the universe. But it's a dead certainty you'll understand the universe if you do comprehend this. My job is to make you comprehend it. You think you don't have time. You better clear your tables and clear your calendar and make time for this. This is the only aspect of science today that matters. Everything else is for your enslavement and destruction, and you know it. Humans have a blueprint to get the answers to the questions that were blueprinted to get the answers to. This goes to a religious dimension, but we're not going to touch on that now. That's one of the two lines in spheric space. It's this line that goes in one direction, but it's chiral, and it is chiral. You're going to memorize everything I say, or you're not going to get this. So pay attention. There are two spheric chiral directions, out and in. Is that complicated? No! But the idea that that line goes in all directions at once, that is complicated. That's called linear logic. You don't want that now. You need to grow up. It's time to see spherically and think in spherical logic. I'll show you what that means. It has to do with superpositional logic. A monumentally important term today, which is being mistaught, as is entanglement. You're being lied to systematically by men who have lost their fucking minds. All right, so that's one of the two circles, and that's one of the two lines in spheric space. So there are also two surfaces. I say there's three here because this is actually meant as an introduction to hyperspheric space. I'm so far beyond these modern physicists, there's no comparison. Spheric space is beyond all physics and all mathematics right now, but it's the only correct formulation for physics. It's the only way to understand the electron, the proton, and the photon. And the photon is not a particle. But the electron is, although it's a peculiar particle. I understand it fully. No one else understands it at all. Okay? Except in linear formulation, which has a limited validity because linear space is embedded in spherical space. I proved that in 2022, for which I should get a Nobel Prize. And you can shut your fucking mouth. I deserve a Nobel Prize at least for that. So did John Horton Conway, okay? He didn't get one. Then I don't want one either. It's worth $1 million, by the way. But mathematicians have been known to turn down that $1 million. There's only been one so far, but he counts. His name is Perelman. He's still alive in Russia. He's a Russian Jew. He's a Russian Jew physicist mathematician. Actually a pure mathematician. He solved the Poincaré conjecture, was awarded the Clay Prize for $1 million. He said, fuck you all. I follow Perelman. All right, so the other line. What's the first line? It's the radial line. You see that written there. Radial line. It has two chiral directions. The other one is in. Let's just jump ahead here so you know where this is going. The chiral line going out, that's light. That's light. That's light speed. That's light. That's the outline. The inline, what's that? Guess. It's gravity. Gravity. So that's the chiral line going in is gravity. The chiral line going out is light. They have two names in force mechanics. Centripetal force. Learn that term. Look it up in Wikipedia if you have to. Or watch my prior lectures. No one will ever do that because you're retarded. You're not serious. You better start getting serious. So that's one of the two circles on this 2D projection. It's actually a sphere. That sphere is the light cone. It's the light cone of Einsteinian hyperbolic space. That cone is shit. It's shit because it's linear. Idiots. So, we have one sphere at the center of the universe. That's called the universal infinitesimal, the spheric infinitesimal. It has a radius. It's an imaginary radius. Oh, that's sacred ground. Sacred ground? The imaginary space is already been taken by physics. Oh, no, it hasn't. It's been taken by linear apes who say that the complex number plane is real. No, it's not. You'll lose your mind if you go in for complex numbers. Well, you can't be a physicist without complex numbers. You know why? There are no other numbers for the physicists. You know why? Because it's a hybrid two-component system. We're going to go on. So the radial line has a valence of in-out. Remember that. Memorize that! The radial line, one of the two lines in spherical space, has a polar valence of in-out. That's true. Nothing else is. That's centripetal-centrifugal force balance, discovered by Rudyard Josip Bošković and proved by yours truly. That's one sphere. The outer sphere is the surface of the universe going out. What's beyond that? Nobody knows. I do. So learn something. That is the edge of finite space. What's beyond it? Dragons? Satan? What's beyond it? Imaginary space. Imaginary. Steal it right back from the complex monkeys. The true imaginary space, which is actually conformable in linear form with a complex number system, which is why it's so powerful, actually exists. It's called outer infinity. The inner infinity inside the inner surface, that has a radius of 1 over infinity. The outer surface has a value of infinity over 1. Those are the only two infinities in the universe. And there's a version, I should say, a property of infinity that's inside the universe that you and I live in. We don't live outside of the finite universe. The universe is embedded in imaginary space. The visible, physical, real, it's real, the real, finite, visible, physical universe is inside the infinity over 1 edge, and it's outside the quantum edge. The quantum edge is the inner edge. 1 over spherical infinity is the center that's inside the surface. That means that the stuff we call space, the basis of science is space. Einstein supposedly reformulated it. He went halfway. I got the full solution. And this solves the quantum paradox, as I will be showing you, but we want to get space-time today. I think you're starting to see it, but where's time? That is the hardest problem of all. That's what you're going to learn today. All right, so the inner surface is a physical thing called a proton. A proton. The thing that is called a neutron, you can forget about. The proton and the neutron are exactly the same particle. They're the same particle. And it's the only space particle. there's another particle that exists in contraspace. And what is contraspace? It's something that blows the minds of everybody, because that's where time is actually found. It's in contraspace. It's perpendicular to real space. You can see that on this diagram, and I'll be showing that to you in just a moment. So pay attention. The outer surface is infinity over 1. The inner surface is 1 over infinity. That's in multiplicative space, for which the correct term is proportional space. They look like fractions because they are. They look like they all have a 1 in them, either on the top or the bottom. That is the numerator and denominator. Picture 2 fractions, you have 4 numbers. 2 of them on the diagonal are 1. The other one is the conjugate number. For instance, 1 over 1 times 1 over 1. What's that? It's 1 over 1. 1 over 2 times 2 over 1. What's that? 1 over 1. Remind you of anything? That's light speed. That's light speed. It's 1 over 1 with 2 different data types. We're getting there, but I'm giving you all of this as fast as I can so you'll synthesize it. I already have. Now it's your job. I can't do that for you, but I'm going to try to pressure you into synthesizing all of this information. Because if you get it, you're going to heaven. And that's no fucking lie, asshole. So guess what your physicists are doing? They're dragging you down to hell. And that's exactly where you're going to go if you stick around with those money-grubbing fucking fairies. They're liars. And they know it. But they get paid for it. Now, the next 4 lines down refer to the point, the 3 surfaces, the 3 regions, and the hyperspheric contrapoint. You don't need to know about hyperspheric space yet. That'll be in June, which will double blow your mind. And then you'll go to a higher level of heaven. But for the time being, we need to work hard. You do. I'm working hard to try to teach this to you. So the inner surface is spherical. That's why the proton is a sphere. You know why? It has a radial force line. You know what that generates? A force field. What's its shape? It's a sphere. So that inner circle is a sphere. And there's nothing smaller than that. So there's no such thing as 0. There's also no such thing as the center of anything, the way it's formulated in physics. That's how bad it is. All the centers formed, for instance, for the universe itself in the Big Bang, that's a null center, so that can't possibly be right. Also, the supermassive black hole has what's highfalutin called a singularity. All that means it's 0, which is not a number, and its only function is to destroy your fucking mind. That's the value of 0, which means that's the value of your linear number system. It'll drive you insane and drag you to hell. And if you make money in the meantime, you'll answer to God. Not me. I'm not your judge. But I am your fucking professor. So that is the inner surface. It's the quantum. It has a radius. And the value is SpaceTime. And its numeric value is light speed. The outer surface represents the second force. On the inner surface, we're talking about centripetal force, gravity. The proton defines gravity. And that is the unified field solution. That unifies gravity and electrodynamics, which is a misnomer. And we'll get around to electrodynamics later. The great failing of Maxwellian, Clerkian, or Jamesian, James Clerk Maxwell, the great failing of his magnificent system, and it is a 4D system, by the way, and the magic of 4D is that you can work in a time component. Now, Maxwell formulated his theory of electrodynamics, which has stood the test of time. He formulated it in at least 3 ways. And it was basically Higgs who decided on the vector calculus form, which is now accepted. But it's also a quaternion solution, which is 3D hypercomplex. So that's what quaternion means. If you're interested in that, I don't recommend it because you're going to be stuck in linear algebra. This is the integral solution to all of Maxwellian electrodynamics and Einsteinian spacetime and the quantum paradox itself, none of which can be understood except in spherical space. And that makes the mathematics correct as well. You'll never need calculus again. Calculus itself is an error. Calculus is a mistake. You should never use calculus. Unless you're trying to make money for Satan. I'm sorry. I mean the government. The one who changes your nappies and fills your dog dish for you with filthy lucre. Which means you can lie to the children all you want. I have nothing to do with your psychosis. I'm here to cure it. Alright, so those are the two spheric surfaces. The outer surface, that is the rationalization of infinity. That's the beginning of mathematical physics. Today, right now, I begin it. I'm Euclid. Much, much greater than Euclid. Not saying I'm a great man. I'm saying I'm a great scientist. Because that's how you rate scientists. By all the standards and measures that you fear. Because you know it's going to make you look like a jackass. Too late for that, honey. The world is about to end, in case you didn't notice. So if you want to get the blueprinted answer that'll get you out of your bind and make you sane and bring you happiness, make you pleasing to the one who designed you, you need to answer the design that was given to you. These physicists are liars. You either keep your mouth shut or you speak science. You cannot speak science unless you're speaking the truth. None of them do. And they think they can get away with it because it's dog eat rat for the most money. Fame is just a sidelight. They want the fucking money! Who controls that? The government does. Government's your friend, right? Yeah, if you like butt fucking Trump. Okay? Is that what you want? Or turn to your Christian church. Maybe they have the answer. The Christian church? Really? They pass the plate every Sunday, don't they? Or maybe you'll find a special church. Well, I did. And they're all satanic. So there's no religion and there's no rationality in humanity. But there is in the universe. I discovered it. So those are the two spherical surfaces, out and in. The two radial line modes, centrifugal and centripetal, and the perpendicularity that replaces the fifth postulate. The true replacement for Euclid's fifth postulate on parallelity is to replace parallelity with perpendicularity. See those spokes coming out? Now look at the circles. Now look where a line crosses the circle. What's that angle? It's 90 degrees in spherical space. That's the only right angle in the universe. It's the radial line and the sphere are perpendicular. That's the only parallelity there is perpendicularity. You've been brainwashed with polar thinking. Plus and minus don't exist. There is no such thing as electrodynamic polar valence. Meaning 180 degree valence between the proton and the electron. Those liars? No, they're not plus and minus. The true relationship between the electron and the proton is on this diagram, because the electron makes that sphere, but the proton makes the radial line. Why then does the electron make a sphere around the proton? Because the radial line makes a force field. and a field is not a line. It's a sphere. They're so closely related that you have to say them together. And this is the true basis of electromagnetism, EM, which are known to be perpendicular. Maxwell proved that. But your scientists, your physicists, are too stupid. They're too retarded. They're too brain dead. They're too self-blinded. And they're too sinful to admit the obvious, that the electron is perpendicular to the proton because of their respective force fields. The proton exerts a centripetal force field. That's why it pulls in space and curves it. That's due to the proton. What does the electron do? It produces light by centrifugal force. Those are the two forces that balance the universe. Who's ever going to tell you that? This goes right down to the mathematical basis. 1/2 times 2 over 1 equals 1. What does that mean? It means the highest wavelength in the universe, which is 1/2, times its reciprocal, which is the lowest frequency in the universe. That was discovered by Max Planck. Those multiply to light speed, 1 proportion 1. That's on this diagram. None of your physicists will ever tell you that, because they're devoted to plus minus. That doesn't exist, honey. That's a linear concept. Because if you have 0 and you need your linear numbers, they go positive. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Uh-oh, there are no negative numbers. That's an artifact of linear Bronze Age stupidity. And once you get around to taking a look at some real geniuses like Huygens and Boshkovich, don't forget about Einstein. Forget about his fucking mathematics. I believe in my heart that if Einstein had known the spherical geometry that I know, he would have instantly revised his theory of space-time. And the correct relationship is not space with time. It's linear space with linear time, but you see space is not linear, it's spherical. So what is the component that goes with space when space is spherical? It's not time, because time is derivative, as is linear space. So if you integrate space into its sphericity, which is its native state, the universe is spherical, that's been proved, then what goes with space? Energy. That'll be in the next lecture. I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly did. I hope you know that I'm posturing with my anger. So stay tuned. This is it. So stay tuned and keep looking up at night. We'll be right back.